Hello everyone, and welcome back to another speedrun video. So this time, again, we're going with our standard repertoire. We'll go for sort of like a modern type of move order this time, but inevitably we'll play d6. And depending on what system our opponent plays, especially if our opponent plays a very harmless system, such as the two knights and doesn't try to attack our king too much, we will just develop our knight to f6 and transpose back into a Pirc. So d5 is a very harmless move. It's just grabbing some space in the center, but it allows black to challenge the center later on. Okay, so now we have to decide what type of pawn structure we want to head towards. We could play the move pawn to c6 and attack the pawn chain. We could also maybe push the e pawn up to try and fix that pawn structure. Could also kick this bishop away with h6. Might play h6 first just to ask where that bishop is going. And again, the same mistake is cropping up pretty much every single game at this level. And that is white is just giving up this star squared bishop. So here we're going to take with the pawn instead of taking with the bishop, because we can actually push this pawn to f5, get rid of the double pawns, and then we can also put pressure with rook e8, and we're opening up lines of attack on this open e file as well. So now we can play the move pawn to f5. After move pawn to f5, pawn takes, we can throw in this very important intermezzo check. And the check is not incredibly dangerous. I mean, white can just move the king to f1, but white may not want to do that. Might want to play a different move and might want to block instead. And then we have some options, like bishop is open. Maybe we can recapture back on f5. We can also just play knight d7, put the knight into the e5 square. That's another option. Let's just go for that one. Okay, we're just going to play the move knight to e5 now. Or do we play knight to c5? Knight c5 is also a good move here. If we play knight to c5 and play f5, we can take this bishop and then we get two really good bishops on this diagonal. Let's go for that. Let's go knight c5. So whenever you have double pawns, you want to try and undouble your pawns if you possibly can. Now the issue of playing f5 right away was that after pawn takes, bishop takes, then we would have to damage our pawn structure further. Whereas here we can play f5, and then after pawn takes, we can take the bishop first before capturing on f5. We also can create an immediate attack on the king side, on the queen side, sorry, with moves such as, a5, a4, a3. But I want to undouble these pawns first. So let's undouble the pawns, get these two bishops into the game, and then we're going to start pushing our pawns on the queen side. So f5, we throw in this intermezzo check. So very important in-between moves. So just keep in mind in-between moves in your games. They can make a huge difference. And now we take on f5. And now we have two bishops versus two knights. But clearly our bishops are much, much better than white's knights here. Now we have opposite side castle positions. So in this type of positions, we want to open up the queen side and push pawns on the opposite side against your opponent's king. So here I'm looking at plans such as a5, a4, a3. There's also plans of playing b5. You can even play b5 immediately and just sacrifice a pawn here. That would also be totally fine. I also have a plan of playing bishop to g4 just to be annoying and just to ask white what he's going to do. because he doesn't want to damage all his pawns in this position. So I could play bishop to g4. It also stops white playing knight d4, which is probably going to be his next move. So if he plays knight to d4, he does block off my bishop a little bit, does attack my bishop, force my bishop to probably drop back to d7. So I could throw in this move bishop to g4. I can also just go for the immediate attack with pawn to b5. So have a couple of options here. I'm going to go with bishop to g4. Just to ask white, what's he going to do about this knight? Does he want to give himself double pawns on the f file? Okay, it seems like he does. He wants to allow the double pawns. Okay, I'm going to go queen f6 in this position, creating a very dangerous queen and bishop battery. It also stops this knight from moving, because now this b2 pawn is always going to come under attack in a lot of positions. Also, queen f6 attacks this pawn on f3, so I'm threatening to take here. I do open up the g file with my last move by capturing this knight, but I don't think the g file will be easy to make use of. If he ever plays h4, I can always just block it with the move pawn to h5, and there's really no, tactical danger at all. And yeah, here our opponent has gone for the immediate attack on the queen with the move knight to e4, but yeah, this allows this nice checkmate on this diagonal, so we can just play the move queen takes on b2. Okay, so let's have a analysis of this game. So the modern move order with g6 and bishop g7 first is very, very handy, because it cuts out some options, dangerous options, which white can play against our mainline Pirc. After the move knight f3 and knight c3, we can transpose back into our Pirc whenever we like. And here d5 is not particularly dangerous. The big mistake there from white is after the move h6, just giving up this bishop too early. This has happened in a couple of games now, and white should just retreat this bishop to h4 or retreat this bishop back to e3 or d2. There's no need to give up this bishop so early. So in the case of bishop to h4, you can possibly play g5 to chase that bishop away further, or I can play, let's say I move pawn to e5. This would lead to more of a King's Indian type of position, which is what we would get if our opponent played to move pawn to d4. So this would go well with your repertoire, to go for this type of pawn structure where the plan is very simple. Like here you can maybe play g5, knight h5, and maybe play f5. Or maybe you can unpin the queen, for example. Let's say the bishop moves, you could unpin the queen. Very typical move, queen to e8. Castles, then you could move your knight somewhere. Let's say knight h5, and then you can go for this pawn push with pawn to f5, and then whenever white takes, you can recapture back with the pawn. And this, as we'll see later on in King's Indian games, very, very typical plan. The other option is, of course, to go c6, and this leads into more of like a dragon type of position, where you can play c6, maybe develop your knight, maybe capture the pawn, maybe look to bring the queen out to a5, or so on, so forth. And this is also very playable as well. But after h6 takes, we take the pawn, and now I believe black is seriously better, because we get rid of that bishop, and both our bishops are in the game now. So I wanted to play bishop g4 here, just to not allow white to play knight d4. For example, if I played some other move, let's say a5, then knight d4, my bishop would have to retreat to d7. It's still very, very good for black. I can follow up with b5, b4 type of ideas, but I just wanted to find moves which pose white some problems. So after the move bishop g4, white has to decide whether he wants to allow the double pawns or waste another tempo on a move such as queen e3, where it could be attacked again. Or I could play queen f6, threatening to take here and double the pawns again. Rook e8's coming. So you want to look for moves which set some practical problems for your opponent. After h3 we can double the pawns, and after queen f6 here, yeah, our opponent fell into the checkmate with the move knight to f3. But if they didn't fall into it, again, we still have a very pleasant position and the knight is unable to move. So let's say white plays queen d3 instead. We have a very straightforward plan here. We can even sacrifice a pawn to b5 if we want to, but I mean, just a sort of typical plan of pushing these pawns up the board, putting the rooks behind them looks very, very dangerous to me and should be fine for black. So I hope you enjoyed this game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.